In the final days of Arda, when shadows devour the light and all hope seems lost, a battle will erupt like none the world has ever seen. A clash of gods and heroes, of fire and fury, destined to bring about the end of the Dark Lord Morgoth. Welcome back to Fairly Fictional, where today we delve into the second prophecy of Mandos and Tolkien's vision of Arda's last stand. After his defeat in the War of Wrath, Morgoth was expelled from Arda and cast into the timeless void, a realm beyond the reach of time and space. Here his spirit drifted, severed from the world, while the Valar and the children of Ilúvatar sought to rebuild the lands he had scarred. Yet, as foretold by Mandos, the Dark Enemy's exile was not to be eternal. As ages passed and Arda grew old, its guardians, the Valar and Maiar, wearied by their long vigil. It was in this waning hour that Morgoth perceived his chance. Seizing upon their weariness, he slipped through the door of night, a dark gate that lay at the world's edge, and returned from the void. With his arrival, a shadow fell upon Arda, and Morgoth set his malice upon the light of the world. Thus, the last battle, Dagor Dagorath, was set in motion, a final clash to determine the fate of all creation. For a third time, Morgoth turned his wrath upon the sources of light and radiance. Just as he had destroyed the lamps of the Valar in the ancient days, and later poisoned the two trees of Valinor, he now assailed the sun and the moon. With their destruction, darkness engulfed the world. No longer did light shine upon the lands, for Morgoth had blotted out the last source and plunged Arda into shadow. High above the darkened lands, Arundil the mariner kept his watch, bearing the radiant Silmaril upon his brow. For long ages he had sailed the heavens, guarding against the threat of Morgoth's return. Now, as he beheld the darkness gathering on the plains of Valinor, he knew the time had come. The final battle was upon them. In a moment of fateful resolve, Arundil descended from the heavens like a blazing spear. His light, white and fierce, cut through the shadows. Striking Morgoth from the air, he forced the Dark Enemy from the skies and drove him down to the earth. But Arundil's work was not yet complete, for Morgoth's fury was unleashed. Dragons, drakes, and ancient creatures of nightmare rose from their long slumber, summoned to serve their master in the war that would shatter the world. In the final days, the peoples of Arda gathered to wage the last battle, known as Dagor Dagorath, upon the lands of Valinor. Leading the charge was Tulkas, the indomitable Valar. Tulkas had long stood as Morgoth's greatest foe, a spirit of relentless power, laughter, and boundless strength. Unarmed and unmounted, Tulkas entered the fray with a laughter that dispelled the very darkness of Morgoth's shadow. At his right hand stood the Maiar Eowyn, herald of Manwë, unmatched in skill with arms. Eowyn, bearing the banner of the Valar king, was a beacon of hope, a fierce and shining defender of Arda. At Tulkas's left stood Turin Turambar, the mortal hero who had once been cursed by Morgoth and driven to despair. Turin, alongside his sister Nienor, was purified after death, his spirit cleansed of the darkness that had plagued him in life. By the will of the Valar, Turin was granted a place in Valinor, restored as a mighty warrior, reborn for this final battle. Now he carried his black blade, Gurthang, a sword that had once tasted his own blood and was now destined to be turned upon his ancient foe. Then, upon the fields of Valinor, the last battle was gathered, a final reckoning that summoned the hosts of Arda to face Morgoth once more. On that day, Tulkas, the mighty Valar who had long been Morgoth's foe, met him in combat. Thousands of years before, in the ancient Battle of the Powers, Tulkas had wrestled with Melkor at Utumno, casting him to the ground in defeat and binding him with the enchanted chain Angainor, forged by Aule. Yet in this final clash, the outcome was grim, for Morgoth, driven by hatred and despair, proved victorious on the fields of Valinor. With a roar that split the heavens, Morgoth faced his last challengers. Eonwë, blazing with the light of the Valar, and Turin Turambar, bearing the black sword Gurthang, his gaze cold and unyielding. The field of battle erupted as Eonwë struck first, his blade carving arcs of brilliant light against Morgoth's shadowed form. But Morgoth met him, his strength terrible and unbroken. In the midst of this clash, Turin charged forward, his black blade gleaming like a shard of night. He struck at Morgoth's flank with a fury born of ages of suffering, Gurthang meeting the dark enemy's armour with a crack that echoed across the plains. Morgoth staggered, turning to face Turin, and the two locked in deadly combat. Blow after blow, Turin pressed on, his strikes fierce and relentless, every movement carrying the weight of his mortal vengeance. Morgoth retaliated, his strength like a storm, yet Turin held his ground, his spirit refusing to yield. In this final confrontation, Turin wielded Gurthang, the sword that he had once used to take his own life, and struck Morgoth a mortal blow. With a final, powerful thrust, Turin drove Gurthang into Morgoth's heart, the black blade piercing through shadow and flame. Morgoth's scream resounded across the world as his form wavered, shattering into darkness. The ancient prophecy of Turin's vengeance was realized as he left the battlefield. Long ago, it had been spoken by Finduilas, daughter of Orodreth, king of Nargothrond, that Turin's stature shall reach that of Morgoth in some far day to come. With Morgoth's fall, the children of Húrin were avenged, and all who had suffered under the enemy's malice found solace. Morgoth's spirit was scattered, and his dark influence erased from the world of the living. With Morgoth vanquished, Manwë finally descended from Tanicatil, the tallest peak in Arda. Alongside him came Fëanor, the fiery spirit who had long lingered in the halls of Mandos. At last, the three Silmarils, lost to air, earth and sea, were reclaimed. Eärendil, who bore the light of one Silmaril upon his brow, surrendered it willingly. In an act of profound humility, Fëanor broke the jewels he had once guarded so fiercely, jewels he had refused to surrender, even when the trees of Valinor were first destroyed. Now, in the final reckoning, he willingly shattered the Silmarils, releasing their light for the renewal of the world. Their light, released at last, was given to Yavanna, who rekindled the two trees of Valinor. As the radiant glow surged forth, the very mountains of Valinor were levelled, allowing the light to spill across all the world, reaching every corner of the lands, from the highest peaks to the depths of the seas, uniting all of Arda under a new and undying light. And so Arda was reborn. The dead among the elves arose, their spirits rekindled. The lands that had long been buried beneath the waves were lifted once more, and a new age dawned, unmarred by Morgoth's shadow. In that final hour, the second music of the Ainur began, a song woven by both the Ainur and the children of Ilúvatar. This music, greater and more splendid than the first music of the Ainur, echoed throughout the cosmos, for every voice understood its part, and devoid of the corrupting influence of Melkor, all sang in harmony. The secret fire, that most ancient light of Ilúvatar, was bestowed upon them, and their song became creation itself. Even the dwarves found their place in this new song. Hallowed by Ilúvatar, they joined Aule in remaking Arda, their skill and resilience bringing strength to the world's renewed foundations. Thus, with the last battle fought, the light rekindled, and the song sung, the world was as it was meant to be. The second prophecy of Mandos was the promise of a world broken, yet reborn, where even darkness must yield to light, and where Arda, at last, was whole. Thank you for being part of today's exploration into the mythic tale of Arda's End. Your support makes these journeys possible, so if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to help me reach my target of 10,000 by the end of the year. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.